I'm Susan Saylor, and today I'm interviewing Susan Small, who is a member of the Pittsburgh Pathwork community. Hi, Susan. Thanks for being willing
Hi,
to do the
Susan.
interview.
Thank you.
Um, in the beginning, how did you find out about Pathwork?
Well, I learned about Pathwork more than 30 years ago um, because I knew three people that were going down to Seven Oaks Pathwork program in Virginia for the transformation program. And they were all people that I knew pretty well. So I would hear about them going down there for a weekend and then coming back. And I don't think I was very curious about it at the time. I knew that that they were having a powerful experience, but I just wasn't in any place to ask about it. So I've known about it for a really long time, but I really didn't know that much about Pathwork at all. Um, and then this was like maybe 6 months before the pandemic started. So skip forward 30 some years. Um, and I was talking to a friend, and I said that I was looking for a way to grow spiritually. And she is somebody who's very deeply involved in Pathwork. And she handed me the brochure um, for the first Wednesdays. They had this really nice brochure for that year and all the lectures. And she said, "Why don't you come?" So I started to go to First Wednesdays. So whenever that was, 3, 4 years ago, right before the pandemic. Um, and I was interested, and I knew some people there. And but then the pandemic hit and everything went online. Um, and so I did some workshops and I did the foundation program that I think you were in. Um, and I was having a really hard time during the pandemic because I'm a very social, extroverted person and I really like contact with people in person. And I just really was feeling very depressed. And I felt like the pathwork stuff on Zoom it was enough to sort of keep me interested and alive, but it wasn't, I felt very alienated because it felt like, I think I mentioned this before. Um, I felt like everybody knew each other and they were all like waving to each other on Zoom, and I didn't know any of these people. And so it was hard to make a connection. So I kept waiting for them to have the transformation program in person. And they'd scheduled it for 1 year, but then the pandemic was still going on. So I had to wait another year. But now I'm been in the transformation program for it's almost a year and a half. Um, so really deeply involved in pathwork only for about the last year and a half, but dabbled before that.
Well, the right time approached.
It did,
So,
right?
what was it that drew you to Pathwork? I mean, you've mentioned wanting to grow spiritually, but what about Pathwork made you feel that that was a home?
Well, I trusted the people that I knew that had been in it. So that was a help. And like I'm a therapist and I've had a ton of my own therapy. And I'm also involved in a 12-step program. So I've had a lot of spiritual growth in that. But I felt like Pathwork offered something a little deeper. Um, it was sort of the combination of this psychological, social, and emotional growth plus the spiritual growth. So that was really what drew me because I really wanted to explore that um, spiritual aspect um, deeper in a more deep way.
Well,
And
that makes a lot of sense. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no,
Wait,
that's okay. That's all I was going to say. That was
okay.
good. Yeah.
Most people say being in pathwork changes how they live their lives. Would you say that's true for you?
Yeah, I would say that. Let me think about that for a minute though, because I think it's changed a lot about me internally and then consequently how I live my life. I think um, Well, I'll just talk a little bit about what I've gained. I think I've learned to know myself better, and be willing to look at the negative as well as the positive, and look at the ways that have presented myself inauthentically in the world, like with a mask. And so I feel like I'm a more authentic person. So that's one way that I'm living differently, is not is working hard not to to wear a mask, and to present myself in a more authentic, genuine way. And then that being being able to look at myself honestly, and understand where I was coming from has helped me, I think, understand other people as well, so that I can have that compassion for myself, be able to look at the ugly, but also have compassion. And I think that helps me with relationships with other people too, because I can have that open heart for other people in a compassionate way. Um, that comes from my working on that myself. So,
What a gift to have
oh,
compassion for yourself and to offer that to others.
yeah,
That
yeah.
that's really impressive.
Thank you.
Math work is not always easy, and you mentioned the beginning was a little bit rocky. Um, what would you say has been especially challenging about path work?
Well, I think two things. One is when I was first coming around, it felt to me like pathwork was really dwelling on the negative. Um, by looking at our unconscious, and looking at the child consciousness that's, greedy and demanding. And I really struggled with that. I was sort of like, why do they have to look on the dark side? Um, I had a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah.
And that I understand it now, but that was a struggle that I had. And I think it's that resistance has pretty much evaporated. Like I can really see the wisdom in looking at those aspects of myself that either are unconscious or are negative or destructive, and look at them honestly, and then see how I want to live my life differently. So yeah, so I had a lot of resistance to that. The other thing that I have ha had, and not so much now, resistance to, was it would feel to me, this was more when I would go to First Wednesdays. It felt to me like people talked about their pathwork experience like it was a religious conversion. Um, and I grew up in a very religious family, and I grew up among missionaries. And I had a lot of experience with proselytizing and people trying to convert other people, and people having conversion experiences. And it was that I have I've been wounded by some of that. And so I think I've really resisted when people talk about these massive transformations that they have in pathwork, and it feels like religious conversion to me. Um, I recently thought about quitting pathwork because of a lecture that my transformation program was assigned, and I was highly insulted and outraged and disappointed, and I just had this enormous reaction to this lecture, which had a religious aspect to it. Um, and I'm like, I'm out of here. This is, I felt like one of the beautiful things about pathwork, I think, is that there's so much latitude towards what your belief system is and how you conceive of a higher power, or spirit or God, whatever you want to call it, and that you define that for yourself. And that has been a great relief to me. I love that about path work, but this lecture didn't sound like that. It sounded very different. And so I was really angry about it. Fortunately, I've been around long enough. And divine intervention, maybe 4 days after I read this lecture, I had scheduled a lunch with a woman who I've known for a really long time, who was at one time the spiritual director of the Pittsburgh Pathwork. And so I took the lecture to lunch with me, and I'm like, look at this. This is so outrageous. Um, and she listened to me, and she said what any pathwork teacher would say, I think, what a beautiful problem. And I wanted to throw my plate at her. But I didn't. And I listened to her, and she said, clearly you've got some woundedness here that you need to attend to, that you need to follow up on. And she talked me through it a little bit more. And then I talked to other people. I talked to my helper. I talked to some other people in path work. I talked to people not in path work that I trust. And I came down off of my high dudgeon, um, and uh, and and then we had a transformation program weekend, and I worked through it with the leader a little bit, and so I'm good. And I still don't like this lecture, and I'm just gonna operate on take what you like and leave the rest. Um, and And so I'm good with that. And I think that's the pathwork process. Um, is even when we're disagreeing with something or upset about it or something, just to talk to people about it, work it through, talk to people who know pathwork, talk to other people who know me, and I got to an okay place with it. So that that was my recent challenge. And so I'm feeling okay about it. I don't have to read that lecture again, or I could read it in 5 years and get something very different from it.
Right. Yeah, that's quite a process you've been through.
Yeah, it was all
Gone
in the last three
from
weeks.
outrage to to looking at the outrage.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's very pathworky, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
to have an emotional reaction to something and then, okay, notice that's what I'm doing. I'm having an emotional reaction. What's it about? What can I do with this? What can it teach me? Yeah. So fortunately, I didn't leave pathwork.
Fortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Now, you've already talked a bit about this, but overall, what would you say the most significant change that you see in yourself?
Yeah, I looked at that question and I thought, whoa, the most significant change. I think it's this it's the acceptance of the duality of our nature, like as humans, like that we're not perfect and that we do have a darker, more destructive, more selfish, more controlling side, and then, or primitive side, and also that we have a loving, learning, growing, um, compassionate side too. And I think that I don't know, there's something about all the work that I've done in path work that just helps me accept that. Just, I'm both um and not perfect.
Oh, that is so true for me.
That's it.
I still have a lot of trouble with perfection.
Yes, yes. Well, there's that.
So
Yes.
we've talked about a number of things. For people who don't really know much about pathwork, is there anything you can think of that you would like to say that we haven't talked about yet?
I would say I, I I would say that I've just really found it to be an opportunity for growth. And to me, what was important to me was that it was not dogmatic or doctrinaire. Even though we have the guide, we have the lectures, we have, you know, instructions and things, but it's not restrictive. I feel like it's an open place to explore who we are. So I've sort of already said that, but I just think that's really important. And I would also say it takes a while to get the hang of it. So, you know, if someone's interested, they should try a few things. Come to First Wednesdays, take, um, go on for a weekend workshop, or there's a lot of things in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of things that are free that are online. So I just would say dabble a little bit and see what works for you. Because some things work better than others for people. And
Well,
for me, I need to be in person. That's me. I just need to be in person. But there's lots of stuff online. So if you can't make it to Pittsburgh, there's a lot you can still do.
oh, absolutely. I really like the way you put one of your ideas. Pathwork is an open place where you can explore who you are. There are not many places like that.
Right, right,
Are truly open. You can explore who you are, and there's support.
right. And I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing that I would add is I've just really met so many wonderful people um, in Pathwork. So there is a lot of support, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for your
Oh, you're
willingness to do
welcome.
this
Yeah.
interview.
Thanks for talking to me.
It's
I'm
been
glad I
fun
got a chance to talk with you in person.
after all
I mean,
these years.
yes, yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.